Section 22 of Highways in Hiding by George O. Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 22. "Look," I blurted, with a sudden rush of brain to the head. "If I'm so all-fired important to both sides, how come you managed to sequester me for 4 months?" "We do have laws of privacy," said Pharaoh simply, "which neither side can afford to flout overtly. Furthermore, since neither side really knew where you were, they've been busily prowling one another's camps, and locking up the prowlers from one another's camps, and playing spy and counter-spy and counter-counter-spy, and generally piling it up pyramid-wise," she finished with a chuckle. "You got away with following that letter to Catherine because uppermost in your mind was the brain of a lover hunting down his missing sweetheart. No one could go looking for Steve Cornell, Mekstrom carrier, for reasons not intrinsically private." "For 4 months?" I asked, still incredulous. "Well, one of the angles is that both sides knew you were immobilized somewhere going through this cure. Having you a full Mekstrom is something that both sides want, so they've been willing to have you cured." "So long as someone does the work, huh?" "Right," she said seriously. "Well, then," I said with a grim smile, "the obvious thing for me to do is to slink quietly into New Washington and to seek out some high official in secrecy. I'll put my story and facts into his hands, make him a Mekstrom, have him cured, and then we'll set up an agency to provide the general public with—" "Steve, you're an engineer. I presume you've studied mathematics? So let's assume that you can, bite one person every 10 seconds. That's 6 persons per minute, 360 per hour, and 8640 per day. With 160 million Americans at the last census, 60 years without sleep. I see what you mean." "Not only that, Steve, but it would create a panic, if not a global war. Make an announcement like that, and certain of our not-too-friendly neighbors would demand their shares or else. So now add up your time to take care of about 3 billion human souls on this earth, Steve." "All right, so I'll forget that cockeyed notion. But still, the government should know." "If we could be absolutely certain that every elected official is a sensible, honest man, we could," said Pharaoh. "The trouble is that we've got enough demagogues, publicity hounds, and rabble-rousers to make the secret impossible to keep." I couldn't argue against that. Pharaoh was right. Not only that, but government found it hard enough to function in this world of Rhine Institute with honest secrets. "Okay, then," I said. "The only thing to do is to go back to Homestead, Texas, throw my aid to the Highways in Hiding, and see what we can do to provide the Earth with some more sensible method of inoculation. I obviously cannot go around biting people for the rest of my life." "I guess that's it, Steve." I looked at her. "I'll have to borrow your car." "It's yours." "You'll be all right?" She nodded. "Eventually I'll be a way station on the highways, I suppose. Can you make it alone, Steve? Or would you rather wait until my parents are cured? You could still use a telepath, you know." "Think it's safe for me to wait?" "It's been 4 months. Another week or 2? "All right. And in the meantime I'll practice getting along with this new body of mine." We left it there. I roamed the house with Pharaoh, helping her with her parents. I gradually learned how to control the power of my new muscles, learned how to walk among normal people without causing their attention, and one day succeeded in shaking hands with a storekeeper without giving away my secret. Eventually, Nurse Pharaoh's parents came out of their treatment, and we spent another couple of days with them. We left them too soon, I'm sure, but they seemed willing that we take off. They'd set up a telephone system for getting supplies so that they'd not have to go into town until they learned how to handle their bodies properly, and Pharaoh admitted that there was little more that we could do. So we took off because we all knew that time was running out. Even though both sides had left us alone while I was immobilized, both sides must have had a timetable good enough to predict my eventual cure. In fact, as I think about it now, both sides must have been waiting along the outer edges of some theoretical area waiting for me to emerge, since they couldn't come plowing in without giving away their purpose. So we left in Pharaoh's car and once more hit the big broad road. We drove towards Texas until we came upon a highway and then turned along it looking for a way station. I wanted to get in touch with the highways. I wanted close communication with the Harrisons and the rest of them no matter what. Eventually, we came upon a sign with the missing spoke and turned in. The side road wound in and out, leading us back from the highway towards the conventional dead area. The house was a white structure among a light thicket of trees, and as we came close to it, we met a man busily tilling the soil with a tractor plow. Pharaoh stopped her car. I leaned out and started to call, but something stopped me. "He is no Mekstrom, Steve," said Pharaoh in a whisper. "But this is a way station according to the road sign." "I know, but it isn't according to him. He doesn't know any more about Mekstrom's disease than you did before you met Catherine." "Then what the devil is wrong?" "I don't know. He's a perceptive but not too well trained. Name's William Carroll. Let me do the talking. I'll drop leading remarks for you to pick up." The man came over amiably. "Looking for someone?" he asked cheerfully. "Why, yes," said Gloria. "We're sort of mildly acquainted with the Mannheims who used to live here. Sort of friends of theirs. Just dropped by to say hello, sort of," she went on, covering up the fact that she'd picked the name of the former occupant out of his mind. "Oh, the Mannheims moved about 2 months ago," he said. "Sold the place to us. We got a bargain. Don't really know, of course, but the story is that one of them had to move for his health." "Too bad. Know where they went?" "No," said Carol regretfully. "They seem to have a lot of friends, always stopping by, but I can't help 'em any." "So they moved so fast that they couldn't even change their highway sign," I thought worriedly. Pharaoh nodded at me almost imperceptibly. Then she said to Carol, "Well, we won't keep you. Too bad the Mannheims moved without leaving an address." "Yeah," he said with obvious semi-interest. He eyed his half-plowed field, and Pharaoh started her car. We started off, and he turned to go back to his work. "Anything?" I asked. "No," she said, but it was a very puzzled voice. "Nothing that I can put a finger on." "But what?" "I don't know much about real estate deals," she said. "I suppose that one family could move out and another family could move in just in this short a time." "Usually they don't let farmlands lie fallow," I pointed out. "If there's anything off color here, it's the fact that they changed their residence without changing the highway sign. Unless," I suggested brightly, "this is the coincidence. Maybe this sign is really one that got busted." Pharaoh turned her car into the main highway, and we went along it. I could have been right about the spoke actually being broken instead of removed for its directing purpose. I hoped so. In fact, I hoped so hard that I was almost willing to forget the other bits of evidence. But then I had to face the truth, because we passed another highway sign, and, of course, its directional information pointed to that farm. The signs on our side of the highway were upside down, indicating that we were leaving the way station. The ones that were posted on the left-hand side were right side up, indicating that the drive was approaching a way station. That cinched it. "Well," as I told both Pharaoh and me, "one error doesn't create a trend. Let's take another look." One thing and another, we would either hit another way station before we got to Homestead, or we wouldn't. Either one could put us wise. So we took off again with determination and finally left that side of the erroneous highway signs when we turned onto Route 66. We weren't on Route 66 very long because the famous U.S. highway sort of trends to the northeast, and Homestead was in the southern portion of Texas. We left Route 66 at Amarillo and picked up US 87, which leads due south. Not many miles out of Amarillo, we came upon another set of highway signs that pointed us on to the south. I tried to remember whether this section led to Homestead by a long route, but I hadn't paid too much attention to the maps when I'd had the chance, and therefore the facts eluded me. We'd find out, Farrow and I agreed, and then, before we could think much more about it, we came upon a way station sign that pointed into another farmhouse. "Easy," I said. "You bet," she replied, pointing to the rural-type mailbox alongside the road. I nodded. The box was not new, but the lettering on the side was. "Still wet," I said with a grunt. Farrow slowed her car as we approached the house, and I leaned out and gave a cheerful hail. A woman came out of the front door and waved at us. "I'm trying to locate a family named Harrison," I called. "Lived around here somewhere?" The woman looked thoughtful. She was maybe 35 or so, clean but not company-dressed. There was a smudge of flour on her cheek and a smile on her face, and she looked wholesome and honest. "Why, I don't really know," she said. "That name sounds familiar, but it is not an uncommon name." "I know," I said uselessly. Farrow nudged me on the ankle with her toe and then made a swift sign for P in the hand sign code. "Why don't you come on in?" invited the woman. "We've got an area telephone directory here. Maybe—" Farrow nudged me once more and made the sign of M with her swift fingers. We had hit it this time. Here was a woman perceptive, and a Mekstrom residing in a way station. I took a mild dig at her hands, and there was no doubt of her. A man's head appeared in the doorway above the woman. He had a hard face, and he was tall and broad-shouldered, but there was a smile on his face that spread around the pipe he was biting on. He called, "Come on in and take a look." Farrow made the sign of T and M, and that told me that he was a telepath. She hadn't needed the M sign because I'd taken a fast glimpse of his hide as soon as he appeared. Parrying for time and something evidential, I merely said, "No, we'd hate to intrude. We were just asking." The man said, "Aw, shucks, mister, come on in and have a cup of coffee anyway." His invitation was swift enough to set me on edge. I turned my perception away from him and took a fast cast at the surrounding territory. There was a mildly dead area along the lead-in road to the left. It curved around in a large arc, and the other horn of this horseshoe shape came up behind the house and stopped abruptly just inside of their front door. The density of this area varied, and the end in which the house was built was so total that I couldn't penetrate, while the other end that curved around to end by the road tapered off in deadness until it was hard to define the boundary. If someone were pulling a flanking movement around through that horseshoe to cut off our retreat, it would become evident very soon. A swift thought went through my mind. "Farrow, they're Mekstroms, and he's a telepath, and she's a perceptive, and they know we're friendly if they're highways, if they're connected with Scholar Phelps and his—" The man repeated, "Come on in. We've some mail to go to Homestead that you can take if you will." Farrow made no sound. She just seesawed her car with 3 rapid back-and-forth jerks that sent showers of stones from her spinning wheels. We whined around in a curve that careened the car up on its outside wheels. Then we ironed out and showered the face of the man with stones from the wheels as we took off. The shower of dust and stones blinded him and kept him from latching onto the tail of the car and climbing in. We left him behind, swearing and rubbing dirt from his eyes. We whipped past the other end of the horseshoe area just as a jeepster came roaring down out of the thickened part into the region where my perception could make out the important things, like 3 burly gents wearing hunting rifles, for instance. They jounced over the rough ground and onto the lead-in road just behind us. Another few seconds of gab with our friends, and they'd have been able to cut us off. "Pour it on, Pharaoh." I knew I was a bit of a cowboy, but Pharaoh made me look like a tenderfoot. We rocketed down the winding road with our wheels riding up on either side like the course in a toboggan run, and Pharaoh rode that car like a test pilot in a sudden thunderstorm. I was worried about the hunting rifles, but I need not have been concerned. We were going too fast to make good aim, and their Jeepster was not a vehicle known for its smooth riding qualities. They lost one character over a rough bounce, and he went tail over scalp into the grass along the way. He scared me by leaping to his feet, grabbing the rifle, and throwing it up to aim. But before he could squeeze off a round, we were out of the lead-in road and on the broad highway. Once on the main road again, Pharaoh put the car hard down by the nose, and we outran them. The Jeepster was a workhorse and could have either pulled over the house or climbed the wall and run along the roof, but it was not made for chase. "That," I said, "seems to be that." "Something is bad," agreed Pharaoh. "Well, I doubt that they'll be able to clean out a place as big as Homestead. So let's take our careful route to Homestead and find out precisely what the devil is cooking." "Know the route?" "No, but I know where it is on the map, and we can figure it out from—" "Steve, stop! Take a very careful and delicate view over to the right." "Digging for what?" "Another car pacing us along a road on the other side of that field." I tried and failed. Then I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes and tried again. On this second try, I got a very hazy perception of a large moving mass that could only have been a car. In the car, I received a stronger impression of weapons. It was the latter that cinched it. I hauled out my road map and turned it to Texas. I thumbed the sectional maps of Texas until I located the sub-district through which we were passing, and then I identified this section of US 87 precisely. There was another road parallel and a half a mile to the right, a dirt road according to the map legend. It intersected our road a few miles ahead. My next was a thorough covering of the road behind. As I expected, another car was pacing us just beyond the range of my perception for anything but a rifle aimed at my hide. Pacing isn't quite the word. I use it in the sense of they are keeping up with us. Fact is that all of us were going about as fast as we could go, with safety of tertiary importance. Anyway, they were pacing us and closing down from that parallel road on the right. I took a fast and very careful scanning of the landscape to our left, but couldn't find anything. I spent some time at it then, but still came up with a blank. "Turn left at that feeder road a mile ahead," I thought at Pharaoh, and she nodded. There was one possibility that I did not like to face. We had definitely detected pursuit to our right and behind, but not to our left. This did not mean that the left side was not covered. It was quite likely that the gang to the rear were in telepathic touch with a network of other telepaths, the end of which mental relay link was far beyond range, but as close in touch with our position and action as if we'd been in sight. The police make stakeout nets that way, but the idea is not exclusive. I recall hazing an eloping couple that way once. But there was nothing to do but to take the feeder road to the left, because the devil we could see was more dangerous than the devil we couldn't. Pharaoh whipped into the side road, and we tore along with only a slight slowing of our headlong speed. I ranged ahead, worried, suspicious of everything, scanning very carefully and strictly on the watch for any evidence of attempted interception. I caught a touch of danger converging up from the south on a series of small roads. This I did not consider dangerous after a fast look at my road map, because this series of roads did not meet our side road for a long time, and only after a lot of turning and twisting. So long as we went easterly, we were okay from that angle. The gang behind, of course, followed us, staying at the very edge of my range. "You'll have to fly, Pharaoh," I told her. If that gang to our south stays there, we'll not be able to turn down Homestead Way." "Steve, I'm holding this crate on the road by main force and awkwardness as it is." But she did step it up a bit at that. I kept a cautious and suspicious watch out, worrying in the back of my mind that someone among them might turn up with a jet copter. So long as the sky remained clear. As time went on, I perceived that the converging car to the south was losing ground because of the convolutions of their road. Accordingly, we turned to the south, making our way around their nose, sort of, and crossing their anticipated course to lead south. We hit US 180 to the west of Breckenridge, Texas, and then Faro really poured on the coal. The idea was to hit Fort Worth and lose them in the city where fun, games, and telepath-perceptive hare and hounds would be viewed dimly by the peace-loving citizens. Then we'd slope to the south on US 81, cut over to US 75 somewhere to the south, and take 75 like a cannonball until we turned off on the familiar road to Homestead. Fort Worth was a haven and a detriment to both sides. Neither of us could afford to run afoul of the law, so we both cut down to sensible speeds and snaked our way through the town, with Faro and me probing roads to the south in hope of finding a clear lane. There were 3 cars pacing us, cutting off our retreat southward. They hazed us forward to the east like a dog nosing a bunch of sheep towards Pappy's barn. Then we were out of Fort Worth and on US 180. We whipped into Dallas and tried the same circumfusion as before, and we were as neatly barred. So we went out of Dallas on US 67, and as we left the city limits we poured on the oil again, hoping to get around them so that we could turn back south towards Homestead. "Boxed," I said. "Looks like it," said Faro unhappily. I looked at her. She was showing signs of weariness, and I realized that she'd been riding this road for hours. "Let me take it," I said. "We need your perception," she objected. "You can't drive and keep arranging perception, Steve." "A lot of good arranging perception will do once you drop for lack of sleep and we tie us up in a ditch." "But—" "We're boxed," I told her. "We're being hazed. Let's face it, Faro. They could have surrounded us and glommed us any time in the past 6 hours." "Why didn't they?" she asked. "You ask that because you're tired," I said with a grim smile. "Any bunch that has enough cars to throw a barrier along the streets of cities like Fort Worth and Dallas have enough manpower to catch us if they want to. So long as we drive where they want us to go, they won't cramp us down." "I hate to admit it." "So do I. But let's swap, Faro. Then you can use your telepathy on them, maybe, and find out what their game is." She nodded, pulled the car down to a mere ramble, and we swapped seats quickly. As I let the crate out again, I took one last fast dig of the landscape and located the cars that were blocking out the passageways to the south, west, and north, leaving a nice inviting hole to the easterly north way. Then I had to haul in my perception and slap it along the road ahead, because I was going to ramble far and fast and see if I could speed out of the trailing horseshoe and cut out around the South Horn with enough leeway to double back towards Homestead. "Catch any plans from them?" I asked Faro. There was no answer. I looked at her. Gloria Faro was semi-collapsed in her seat, her eyes closed gently and her breath coming in long, pleasant swells. I'd known she was tired, but I hadn't expected this absolute ungluing. A damned good kid, Faro. At that last thought, Faro moved slightly in her sleep, and a wisp of a smile crossed her lips briefly. Then she turned a bit and snuggled down in the seat and really hit the slumber path. A car came roaring at me with flashing headlamps, and I realized that dusk was coming. I didn't need the lights, but oncoming drivers did, so I snapped them on. The beams made bright tunnels in the light, and we went along and on and on and on, hour after hour. Now and then I caught a perceptive impression of the crescent of cars that were corralling us along US 67 and not letting us off the route. I hauled out my road map and eyed the pages as I drove by perception. US 67 led to St. Louis, and from there due north. I had a hunch that by the time we played hide and seek through St. Louis and got ourselves hazed out to their satisfaction, I'd be able to give a strong guess as to our ultimate destination. I settled down in my seat and just drove, still hoping to cut fast and far around them on my way to Homestead. End of chapter 22.